Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today is vlogoween day 4. Today we are reading spooky ghost stories. So we are doing these Haunted Ohio books. I'm going to pick up a couple of stories. These are basically short stories that people have sent in of ghost stories of places that are haunted in Ohio. So we're just going to pick a couple of stories, short stories from 1 and 2, and do a couple of those. And as we always say, please bear with me because I am not the greatest reader, and I'm trying to be the greatest reader that I can be. So, yes. Alright, we're going to read Dearly Departed, Ghostly Lovers. Let me get to the page. Alright, page number 9. Dearly Departed, Ghostly Lovers. For love is strong as death. Alright. Until death do us part. We've all wept over the stories of lovers tragically parted by death. Tristan and Isolde, Romeo and Juliet, but there is more sinister side to death. The demon lover. If I can't have you, nobody will. I can't live without you, and love may create ghosts of a different sort, as the next story tells. Alright. Seeley Rose, by all accounts, was painfully plain, a heavy, lumpish girl whose mind was never quite right. Yet, like any young girl, she fell in love, a love that her family died for. In 1896, on the farm next to the Richland County property where the Ross operated the grist mill, lived a young man, named Jim Burner. He seems to have been one of those gentlemen who would rather die than hurt anyone's feelings, particularly someone as unattractive as Seeley. She made no secret of her passion for Jim and was ridiculed by the others. He seems to have felt sorry for her. With her graceless figure and slow wits, at any rate he spoke kindly to Seeley when they met. And Seeley, somewhere in the depths of her dull mind, took it for something more. The hope of a husband and home. When the other girls laughed at her, she proudly told them that she and Jim were going to be married. Jim was shocked when he heard the story, but he still couldn't bear the cause Seeley pain. To let her down gently, he told her that her parents didn't approve of him, that they had better not meet again. We can only guess at Seeley's reaction, but soon after, Jim told his harmless white lie. The Rose family paid for it. Rebecca Rose was the first to be taken sick, writhing with cramps like fire in her vitals. Her husband David went for the doctor in Newville and fell sick at the doctor's office. Walter, Seeley's older brother, had gone out on business after breakfast and was taken very ill while away from home. Seeley's father lingered many agonizing days while Miss Rose and Walter were not expected to recover. There was some debate over who fixed breakfast in the ill-fated household, Seeley or her mother. Seeley originally told the neighbor woman that she got breakfast that morning, said the paper. This she now denies. Up to Sunday, Miss Rose, who is still a very sick woman, knew nothing of the deaths in the family nor the attending circumstances and suspicions. A friend told her, and since that time she declared that she cooked the breakfast the morning all fell sick. It has also been ascertained that on that Wednesday morning, David Rose, the father, drank 2 cups of coffee, the son Walter drank 1, and Miss Rose, who was not feeling well, drank a half a cup of the beverage. The father died first. The son, who drank the next largest amount, died next. And Mrs. Rose, who got the smallest amount, is still very sick. When Miss Rose miraculously showed signs of recovering, Seeley tenderly administered another reviving cup of coffee. The patient suffered an immediate relapse and expired in agony. The coroner reported that his analysis of Mrs. Rose's internal organs, I am led to believe that Mrs. Rose was given an additional dose of arsenic on the day of her sudden death. As in the case of Lizzie Borden, authorities either lacked conclusive evidence or were reluctant to accuse a daughter of such heinous a crime. But when it was learned that Seeley wanted to get married and her father had opposed the marriage, and when it came out that Seeley had remarked darkly that her father wouldn't live forever, suspicion was thrown on the daughter who had escaped illness. At this, Jim Burner disappeared from the scene. Testimony further revealed that Seeley's brother Walter had unwittingly furnished the poison for his own death. In May, Miss Rose asked him to purchase rat poison on one of his trips to the city. He bought her an arsenic-based poison in a bottle from Burton's drugstore. Miss Rose used a little and set the rest in the cupboard. A short time before the poisonings, Mrs. Rose went to the cupboard and found it was there. It was bare. Court testimony brought out that while Seeley may not be deemed exactly insane, she has the mind of a child, although fully developed physically. A schoolmate of Seeley's stated that the Rose girl was not regarded as altogether right and did not act as other children were when she attended school. The engraved portrait in the newspaper shows a swollen, depressed young woman, her hair carelessly pulled back, a lock hanging limply over her protruding forehead. She slumps as if she had been hanging her head when they told her, sharply, to look at the camera. Her eyes turned down at the corners, blank disappearing eyes, and one eyelid droops. Her thin mouth, pierced tightly at the corners, is clamped over her secret with the dogged determination of the simple. It is a bitter face, a hopeless face, the face of one driven beyond despair by the loss of the only person she ever cared for. That stubborn mouth had no intentions of revealing its secret. Seeley continued to live on alone in the family home. She had nowhere else to go, and she wanted to make sure Jim could find her when he came back. It must have been a lonely, haunted life, with the ghosts of her parents whispering in the kitchen where she fixed her coffee for breakfast. Did she ever have nightmares? Were there greenish, sweating fat faces materialized, vomiting ectoplasms in the dark? Seeley had one friend, a young woman named Teresa, known as Tracy. One day, Tracy invited Seeley over to her farm for a visit. It was a hot day, and they went up into the hay loft for a nap. Gossiping drowsily, Tracy confided to Celia that she was in love. Celia's dull eyes must have brightened up as she thought of her Jim. Tracy told Celia that her lover's family was feuding with her own, and her parents refused permission for them to marry. She declared that there was only one thing to do. She would poison her parents and be free to marry her love. "What would you do, Celia?" she asked. Celia said, "I'd kill them. That's what I'd do. That's just what I did." And she told Tracy how easy it had been to doctor the coffee with rat poison. She finished her story. A breeze sighed through the barn like spirits who have seen justice done. "Celia Rose, in the name of the law, I arrest you for the murder." The sheriff and the prosecuting attorney stepped into the hay. Some people said it was a mean trick to get a confession in such a way, but others said there was no doubt that she was crazy as a bedbug to do such thing. The newspaper called her a modern Bergoria and commented, "The young woman, whether or not mentally defective, certainly had a moral nature thoroughly perverted. At no time has she evinced any remorse over her terrible crime." They condemned her to life in a hospital for the criminally insane. We know what life was like in asylums at the turn of the century. Women shrouded in sheets drenched in icy water, inmates chained, beaten, and tortured. Celia Rose lived on and on to the age of 83. We know nothing of her own death. Perhaps her parents came for her, smiling with blackened lips, holding out their clawed, convulsed hands. Perhaps the God of love sent his angels to bring home this simple-minded child of his, who had no conspicuously failed to honor her father and mother. But if she is at rest, why has her ghost been seen at the small white farmhouse on what is now Malabar Farm? It is only a plain 2-story farmhouse, with no sign that it was the scene of the family tragedy, more suited to the Greek stage than to a Midwest farm. But Celia's ghost walks the halls and stares vacant-eyed out the window on the creekside, her stupid, stubborn mouth set for eternity. What does Celia Rose look for? The sheriff and his men riding up to arrest her? The dark wagon with barred windows to fetch her to the living death of the asylum? Or, pathetically, the lover who never was? Alright, let's find some more. Let's find another one. Let's go to one in Haunted Ohio 2. Let's see. Ooh, let's do Ghost Children. $62. Ooh, Crybaby Bridge. We're gonna do Crybaby Bridge. Back in 1920s, part of Fairfield County, where as uncivilized as the moon, under a train trestle stood a small church where a sect met who fervently practiced their creed, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Since it was the depths of the Depression, they were in bad financial shape and desperate to do something to change their luck. A sacrificial lamb was needed. One of their members had just given birth while she slept. Hard-eyed men stole in and took the child from its cradle. They tied the baby to the railroad tracks above the church and left it there, wailing. The men found the pitiful remains in the morning, chopped to pieces by the passing trains. And ever since that night, no matter the time of year or weather, you can hear a baby screaming as a train approaches. Crybaby bridges have been reported all over Ohio. One is in Rogues Hollow, Wayne County, where, according to legend, at midnight you can hear the cries of a baby who was tossed into the creek many years ago. Still, another is a bridge on Wilberforce Clifton Road, the Devil's Backbone, near Wilberforce University, where tales say the university professor accidentally dropped his child to its death in the 1950s. All right. Nightmare on Elm Street. It seems like a charming brick house with a vine draped over the porch and flowering trees in the front yard. But Oberlin legend has it that the Elm Street home was haunted by a wailing baby ghost. One version of the story says that two sinister sisters lived in the house in the early 1900s. They cruelly abused their maid, who had a small child, and she in turn would walk up and down the servants' staircase, moaning and wailing like a banshee. Sometimes she would pinch her baby to make him howl, and his screams would echo eerily in the stairway. Properly spooked, the old woman would run to the neighbors in terror. Of course, by the time they returned, all was still. One night, as the maid was howling in the stairwell, she tripped and fell down the steep steps. She got up slowly and painfully, then began to scream in earnest. The child was dead. Another story says that the maid got pregnant while working for the two sisters. They treated her so harshly that she killed herself and the baby, then came back to have her revenge from beyond the grave. Whatever the story, the sounds in the house were disturbingly realistic. Two Oberlin creative writing professors, Rachel and Tim Clark, moved into the house in 1968. Shortly afterwards, they began to hear something that sounded like a child crying somewhere above their kitchen. Said Rachel, I would be sitting in the kitchen writing letters and suddenly hear this terrible wailing of a baby just crying and crying, but quite muted. With two young children of her own in the house, Clark would run upstairs to check on them. And by the time she reached the top of the stairs, the crying would stop. This happened 5